Let's talk about, the jaw-dropping moment, the first one, about the color of the baby's skin.
20 minutes of nonstop news continues with royal revelations. It is the talker of the day.
She was 6 months pregnant when she contemplated suicide.
I just didn't want to be alive anymore.
Public service, it's a bright, sharp, hot spotlight, and most people don't.
You said that this interview is like kryptonite for the royal family. And I'm sure Harry and Meghan, when they agreed to have this conversation with you,
has rejected claims she lied during her interview with Oprah. The Duchess of Sussex is being sued.
I was as surprised by the bombshell as everybody else. I was doing an interview to offer them a platform.
And also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What? The Queen is busy. She's busy all week.
After she just invited you?
Yeah.
Just invited me. The Queen's busy. She's busy all week. Do not come up here.
He did not tell me who were a part of those conversations. Right. As you can see, I tried to get that answer on camera and off. You know, it's been reported that Harry and Meghan have received an invitation to the coronation. Do you think they should go?
Still with us to talk about another exclusive clip from our interview with Prince Harry and Meghan. In this on-aired excerpt, the Duchess of Sussex.
Please don't do this with the media. They will destroy your life. But unfortunately,
He's been a subject of global fascination and intense media scrutiny. But after years of watching others tell his life story...
Oprah, have you heard of her?
I've heard of her.
Yeah. Well, it aired last night, and it was filled with royal bombshells.
Yeah. Everybody involved in this, they're all people.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? We need to cut everybody some slack.
The date was March 7th, 2021, and somewhere inside Windsor Castle, a television was on. What happened next, in private, is only now coming to light. Royal biographer Hugo Vickers has spent 60 years inside the orbit of the British monarchy. He met Queen Elizabeth II 40 times. He watched, he listened, he took notes. And in his new book, Queen Elizabeth II, A Personal History, he describes what the Oprah interview actually triggered behind palace walls. And it is not what anyone expected. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives, because here's what most people remember: a 4-word statement. Recollections may vary. Elegant, restrained, quintessentially the Queen. The world read it and nodded. Of course she rose above it. Of course she didn't engage. That's who she was. But Hugo Vickers says that's only half the picture, and the other half tells a very different story. Let's start with what was happening inside that palace the moment the interview aired, because the timing alone should stop you cold. 6 days. That is how long it had been since Prince Philip, then 99 years old, had undergone heart surgery at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London. 6 days since his medical team, according to Vickers, nearly lost him. Twice. The man she had been married to for 73 years had just come within reach of death. And on day 6, Meghan Markle sat down with Oprah Winfrey in a sun-drenched California garden and began talking. Vickers does not mince words about this. He writes that the interview aired with no consideration for the stress the Queen was under or for the precarious health of the Duke of Edinburgh. No consideration. That's the phrase he chose. And it lands differently when you understand what the Queen was actually living through that week. She was not sitting in a palace watching television as a detached observer. She was a wife who had nearly lost her husband, Pawinun, twice, in the span of a week. And the world was about to ask her to respond to allegations made on primetime American television. So when the credits rolled on that CBS broadcast, what did she do? That's where things stop making sense if you assumed she simply moved on. According to Vickers, the Queen did something specific. Something quiet. Something that only the people closest to her would have noticed. Whenever Prince Harry called his grandmother after that night, she no longer took the call alone. She asked her lady-in-waiting to stay in the room. Every time. Without exception. Think about what that means for a moment. This was not a security protocol. This was not a scheduling formality. A lady-in-waiting sitting in on a phone call between a grandmother and her grandson. That is a deliberate act. It is a signal. And the signal said, I no longer trust what happens in this conversation to stay in this conversation. Vickers confirmed this directly. I think that the Queen was obviously feeling rather cautious whenever he got in touch, he said. Cautious? About her own grandson. That single word, cautious, does a lot of work, because this is a woman who had navigated the Cold War, multiple constitutional crises, and decades of tabloid warfare. She did not use caution loosely, and it didn't stop at phone calls. According to Vickers, the Queen's wariness extended to in-person encounters as well. There were growing fears, documented in the book, that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex might be recording private conversations. For what purpose? The Netflix documentary, the memoir, something. Vickers was asked point blank whether the Queen feared being wired during meetings. His answer, yes, wired for recording. It's always a possibility. I'm not saying it happened. But the possibility alone was enough to change her behavior. And here's what's raising eyebrows among royal observers. This was not a woman who made impulsive decisions. Queen Elizabeth II spent 70 years doing the opposite. Every word considered, every action deliberate. So when she changed how she answered the phone, when she quietly ensured a witness was always present, that was not a reaction. That was a conclusion she had already reached. The Oprah interview had confirmed something she suspected, and she acted on it. What did Meghan say in that interview that hit the hardest? On the surface, the recollections may vary line appeared to address the racism allegation. The claim that an unnamed royal had expressed concern about how dark baby Archie's skin might be. That allegation traveled around the world. It was debated, dissected, and ultimately never fully resolved. The palace called it very troubling. Vickers says it left the Queen deeply hurt. But dig slightly deeper and a second wound emerges, one that gets less attention. During that same interview, Meghan described going to the institution to ask for help with her mental health, and being told no. She spoke of feeling isolated, unsupported, unprotected, the clear implication being that the palace, the Queen's palace, had failed her, that the system built around the monarchy had left a vulnerable woman without recourse. The palace did not issue a full rebuttal. It couldn't. And the Queen, who had spent her entire reign defending that institution, watched it happen from a castle where her husband was recovering from heart surgery. So, recollections may vary was not grace under fire. According to Vickers, it was something closer to controlled devastation. She came up with that wonderful remark. He said, recollections may vary, which was a very polite way of putting it. Very polite. The British understatement of the decade. And behind that politeness, according to people close to the palace, was a woman who had been shaken in a way that very few events in her 70-year reign had managed to shake her. Across social media that week, one question kept surfacing. Did Harry know what he was doing to her? Did Meghan? Vickers doesn't go that far directly, but he does say this. What I find unforgivable is the stress that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle put on the Queen in the last years of her life. Unforgivable. That is not careful biographer language. That is a verdict from a man who spent 6 decades observing this institution from the inside. He goes further in the book, writing that the distress the Sussexes caused the Queen in the last years of her life cannot be overestimated. It cannot be overestimated, and yet for years, much dies. Much of the public conversation centered on whether the Queen understood Meghan, whether the palace had been welcoming enough, whether the institution had failed the couple. Vickers is pushing back on all of it. His account describes a queen who had actually bent protocol for Meghan early on. She was invited to Sandringham for Christmas 2017, before the engagement was even official. That was unusual. That almost never happened. Staff nicknamed her Sparkle. There was warmth initially. There was genuine goodwill extended in the early days, more than most people realize and more than the couple has publicly acknowledged. But something shifted. And by the time the Oprah interview aired, that shift had become a wall. The book also reveals that the Queen had urged Harry to slow down, to take more time before committing. She was not the only one. Prince William had said it privately, and according to Vickers, Prince Charles had echoed Lord Mountbatten's old advice to him before Diana. Enjoy the relationship, but don't rush into marriage. No one listened. And with each passing year, the distance between Harry and the institution grew wider until March 7th, 2021, when it became, in Vickers' telling, something that could not be walked back. What nobody talks about enough is what the Queen was carrying simultaneously. Vickers reflects on this directly. What I feel sad about the Queen is that she had a lot of problems going on in the last years of her reign. He said, she had Brexit, she had Boris Johnson, she had issues with Prince Andrew, she had issues with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, whereas she should have been sailing into sort of sunlit uplands, enjoying her platinum jubilee. That's the picture Vickers is painting, a monarch at the end of a historic reign for some who deserved a period of celebration and reflection, instead managing crisis after crisis. And the Oprah interview landed in the middle of all of it, at the worst possible moment when the man she loved most was fighting for his life in a London hospital. Philip died 33 days later, on April 9th, 2021. The Queen sat alone at his funeral, masked, separated from family by COVID protocols, in a photograph that the world would not forget. She had navigated the most painful weeks of her life, largely in private. And somewhere in those weeks, the decision about the phone calls had already been made. What's still unresolved, and what Vickers himself seems to leave deliberately open, is whether the Queen and Meghan ever truly had a moment of repair. The book references the Queen's attitude toward the wedding as almost resigned. A person close to her said her view was simply, "Go ahead, it doesn't affect me." Whether that was quiet acceptance or quiet detachment, Vickers doesn't say, but it's a line that sits in the book without explanation, and the more you think about it, the more it echoes, because this is a woman who never said more than she meant to, and "it doesn't affect me," from the Queen of England about her grandson's wedding, is either the most gracious thing imaginable or something else entirely. The interview that aired on March 7th, 2021, was watched by nearly 50 million people worldwide. The Queen's public response was 4 words. But what she actually did, quietly, deliberately, in the rooms where no cameras were allowed, tells a story that 4 words could never contain. Hugo Vickers was in that orbit long enough to see it. 60 years of observation, 40 meetings, and now, finally, he's written it down. Not as a headline, not as a leak, as history. If this kind of inside account of what was really happening behind palace walls is what you're here for, subscribe to Royal Archives, because there is still a great deal about the Queen's final years that hasn't been fully examined. What she knew, what she chose not to say, and what the people closest to her are only now beginning to reveal. We're not done yet.